Well, it's about time we do something we're really good at. When I don't play poker, I'm a magician of sorts. Let's teleport to the bike. Okay, we're at the bike now. Let's go play poker. I just want to wish you folks all a very happy holiday season before we get into today's episode. I hope this past weekend was a very special and a fun one for you and all of your loved ones. Thank you so much for enjoying this past year with myself. C2B will always be a special place because of you all. One thing that I thought I'd mention as I'm thinking about it as I'm just sitting here is how often have you guys ever looked at a hand, played the hand, and midway through the hand realized that you had a different hand? Like it just transformed. Let's hop into the very first hand of today's episode. We're into the game for 3,000 to start off with, and trust me, this game gets massive. There's a ton of action to go over, so let's hop into it. In this very first hand, Matt makes it $30 to go. I decided 3-bet to $100, and we get 2 callers from the blinds. At this point, Armenian Matt decides to 4-bet jam it all in for $650, and in a brief phone call conversation I had with Matt, he told me that he was in the mood to blast off. Well, I'm here to abide by those wishes. I decide to rejam for $3,000 to not allow my opponents behind me to call with some inferior holdings. Luckily for us, both players end up deciding to fold. We're going heads up in about a $1,500 pot to get things going off with ace-queen. We decide to run out 2 boards, and on the first board it comes ace-queen 4, 6, 8. Great flop for us as we end up flopping 2 pair. Hard to imagine we lose that one. The second board comes out 3, 9, 8, 5, deuce, so no pair there until Matt shows us King 7 offsuit. We are going to scoop against King 7 high. Good hand to you, Matt. Happy to get this party going. I should preface this following hand by letting you guys know, honestly, the 7 deuce game is not on. There is no 7 deuce bounty. Either way, that's not stopping me. As there's 2 early position limps, the action folds to me on the button, and I decide to raise or isolate with 7 deuce offsuit to $100. Both the limpers make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes 10, 5, 4 with 2 clubs and a spade. With the action checking over to me, I decided a bit bigger. I think I'd be betting bigger if I decided to bet with my overpairs. Jacks, queens probably makes sense. So I go and do that, and I bet $210. Kind of probably not the best thing ever, but 2/3 is not the worst thing in the world, I guess. Both players make the call here, and we're going off to a turn card that I think, at least at face value, might be better for me than my opponents as it comes to queen of spades. Again, not the ideal card for my specific hand, but again, that's not stopping me as we have already committed to the roux. The action once again checking over to me, I decide to bet once again for $350. At this point, only the under the gun limper decides to call. The other opponent ends up reluctantly folding, and now we're going off to a river card that comes a king of hearts. All right, again, this run out is pretty much the nut run out for all of my nutted hands or my strong hands. I think I can easily have ace-jack here of ace-jack of spades or ace-jack of clubs as both flush draws miss, but that specific holding turns into the nut straight here. Either way, a little odd when our opponent decides to lead out for $500, leaving himself about $900 behind. I don't know, in the live sense, I got a live tell of a little bit of weakness or reluctancy from my opponent. I decide to do the unthinkable. I decide to jam all in here, going for gusto, and our opponent goes into the tank, so that's kind of a good sign. He goes into the tank for actually quite some time. The only thing going on in my head is, man, it would be so sick if he folds and I can flip this over and we can start to party and be excited, but before anything can come of that, our opponent ends up deciding to call. Oh no. We flip over our 7 high proudly. We're proud to show it. Can't hide behind it. And our opponent shows King 10 offsuit. So we at least got him to think with a really great hand. Better than I had initially thought. I thought maybe at best he has a hand like Queen 10. Otherwise, it just felt like, honestly, from my live read that he had a missed flush draw. But either way, we're going to go ahead and live with our choices here. Because of said 7 deuce debauchery, we ended up agreeing to put the 7 deuce bounty game on. So for the rest of the session, the 7 deuce game is on. We have so many hands to go over in today's session, so let's get through this thing. In this following hand, under the gun, is where I find myself, and there is a straddle going on for $20. Down to King 7 of diamonds here. I decided to raise it up here to $60. The middle position, the small blind, and the straddle all make the call. And we're going off to a flop that is honestly too good for my hand, as it comes queen, 6, deuce with 2 diamonds. Flopping the second up flush draw, I like the sound of that. Action checks to me, I bet here for semi-bluff of $100. On the small blind player by the name of Johnny. He's a very, very wonderful fan of the vlog, so massive shout out to you. He's a part of the C2B familia. He ends up making the call, and we're going off to a turn card that doesn't help us in our specific hand, as it comes with 3 of spades. At this point, it checks over to me once again, and I think we can go multiple ways. I think it's best that we bet here. We can also get hands like ace highs to fold now. I decide to bet once again for $200, and at this point, Johnny calls once again. Well, we're going off to the river card here, looking to improve, and we don't improve in the way we were expecting, but we do end up with top pair. I don't think many hands that my opponent has here that he gets to the river with improve. Considering I do have the king high flush draw, it's hard for my opponent to end up with a better king outside of king queen. So if that's the case, I'd rather put a little bit of pressure on him and look to get value from a hand like queen 10, queen jack. So I decided to bet pretty small here for $300. Our opponent thinks about it for some time before eventually deciding to pay it off because he saw me bluff with 7 deuce high. Either way, it looks like that bluff earlier on is going to be paying us dividends, as our opponent ends up letting us know that our hand is good. Alright, that's more like it. I haven't even had the chance to rack up my chips from the last hand when we get shuffled or dealt in this following hand in the straddle. Under the gun decides to make it $60 to go. He's a good friend of the vlog by the name of Chris. Middle position makes the call. The small blind calls as well, and I'm in the straddle and we look down at an ace. That's good enough to make the call here, so I do just that. The flop comes out unbelievable. Seems like things are working out in our favor early on. Ace 10, 8, rainbow. With the action checking over to Chris, he decides to c-bet for $75. With the action back to me, I decide to bet for $375 as a raise. There is a player that called in between us, which I don't think we have to worry too much about. But the main goal here is to get stacks in against a hand like ace king or ace queen, as Chris can definitely have a hand that's strong from the under the gun position, from raising. Either way, Chris ends up jamming for a total of $1,000. The middle position caller decides to fold. Actions back to me. We're calling, obviously. So we throw it in there, and we decide to run it out 2 times here. The first board comes out of 3 of spades and the jack of clubs. And our opponent shows ace queen here, so he needs to improve on the second board. We've at least locked up half the pot. The second board comes out 10 of spades, dead to an 8, and the river card comes a 4. Unfortunately for us there, we don't scoop as a massive favorite, but to be fair, Chris has been running pretty bad in these spots, so at the end of the day, I like Chris. I can very comfortably say that. I'm happy with the chop pot. And you know what they always say? Everyone loves a chop pot. Bear with me, because this hand, we have some catching up to do as the video starts recording on the flop. Early position limps. Early position 2 decides to make it $75 as an isolation raise. Small blind decides to call. I find myself in the big blind with king 10 offsuit. I decide to call here, mixing things up. Probably not the greatest thing ever to just flat here. Is probably throwing away money, to be fair, but it's not stopping me, and it never has before. The early position limper makes a call as well, and we're going off to a flop that comes pretty good, as it comes deuce, king, queen with 2 hearts. The initial raiser decides to c-bet pretty big here for $175. The small blind calls, and I call, and we're going off to a turn card that comes a 5 of spades. At this point, the initial raiser decides to jam for $550. With the action folded to my opponent here on the right, he decides to make the call for $550. After some thinking, pretty easy call for me as well. It's an overcall. It's a little tricky. Maybe it's a little spewy, but I have top pair. It can't be that bad. So I make the call as well. We do something a little interesting here, as me and Matt do have a little more money behind, but because there is an all-in player, we actually end up giving him the option. If he wants to run it out twice, we can. And he ends up saying that that would be cool. So we decide to no longer play for what's behind for me and Matt, and just decide to run out the board 2 times in the river for the all-in player. It's already a pretty hefty pot going here. The first river is a beautiful king of clubs here. So the flush draws brick out, and we do improve the trips. Matt immediately says he has 2 pair, but that river killed him. Good sign for me. Looking like we need to improve 2 times here. The river card comes a queen of spades, giving Matt a boat on the second board. In this specific instance, the middle position player, who has been a gentleman about it, ends up showing queen jack of hearts for 2 pair and a flush draw breaking out, or excuse me, second pair and a flush draw breaking out. Ouch. Matt shows queen deuce of diamonds, the old queen deuce ball. ends up coming in and working out for him as he wins half the pot. Either way, good hand to everyone involved. Moving on. Man, the private game world is just so much better in every way. It feels like a party when we play these games, as opposed to the funeral that is the 510 community here in Southern California. The straddle is on, the button makes it $75 to go. I find myself on the small blind, and I decide to make the call here with 10-9 of hearts. The big blind decides to 3-bet all in for $500. The button ends up making the call here, and at this point something interesting happens where I have 10 high. I don't have a very good hand, and me and Matt are not playing that deep behind here. So we end up asking them. I say, Matt, Chris, I have 10 high. Do you want me to call and we just close the action, run 2 boards, and just, you know, have some action here? Or I can fold and they can just play their hand out as they want. Both gentlemen end up saying that they'd rather have the action. They'd like to have me in there with 10 high. I mean, who wouldn't? It's 10 high. So I end up making the call here. And $500, 50 big blinds with 10 high. Can't be that bad, right? Who knows? Either way, we end up agreeing to run out 2 full boards here. The first board is outstanding for me as it comes 6, 10, 7. Turn card comes the 8 of hearts, improving us to now a backdoor flush draw. And the river card comes, in fact, the king of hearts, bringing us that backdoor flush. The second board comes out 4, 5, 10. The turn card this time around comes the king of diamonds, bringing in the front door flush. And the river card comes the ace of spades. Probably hard for me to scoop this one. Chris ends up showing king queen, so we end up chopping that. And Matt hasn't looked at his hand to this point outside of seeing a 7. He ends up showing his hand. It's a genuine sweat. We don't know what he can have. Oh my goodness. Matt has 7-4 offsuit. 7-4. Which that is a really good hand for blackjack. Unfortunately, Matt was not notified that to win in poker, it's a good idea to probably look at your hand. They also didn't tell him that this isn't blackjack. Either way, another really freaking fun spot. Happy to go over it with you guys. Let's move on. Honestly, things have been going pretty fair for us outside of the 7 deuce blunder. And this next hand, hijack, makes it $60 to go. I find myself in the button with jack 8 of hearts. I decide to make the call from the button. The big blind and the straddler make the call as well. And we're going off to a flop that comes 10, king, 3, rainbow. So we have nothing really to go with here. We don't have a gut shot. We have jack high. The board's not that great. And even more so when the initial raiser decides to bet $150. Well, I'm in position, and our adversary is a very courageous one. Maybe one that doesn't have to have the nuts here. I decide to make a little float here with the jack high, and the big blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways off to a turn that is a miracle queen of spades. So at this point, we now improve ourselves to an open ender, which is outstanding, and this is the card that I'm going to choose to pounce on. With the action checking over to the initial raiser, he decides to once again double barrel for $450. We're both, everybody in the hand involved has a ton of money behind, and at this point, our opponent has somewhere in the realm of about 3K total, somewhere in that ballpark or that vicinity. I decide to throw out a raise here, though. I make it $1,200 to go. I'm going to use my spot here and leverage my image, although I am blasting off with 7 deuce earlier. For the most part, I play reasonably snug, nothing too outlandish. I don't make any crazy bluffs in this game. The big blind ends up eventually folding, praying for a fold, and unfortunately, our opponent makes a call. So we're looking to improve, and then, oh my goodness, I look down at my hand. I have jack 9 of hearts. I misread my hand. I thought I was bluffing. I have the second nuts. Oh my god. So this has gone from me bluffing to how did I get called? I'm psyched. The river comes a pretty much brick here. Action checks to me once again. Well, now I go from bluffing to having value. I decide to jam it all in here for about $1,700 effective is what my opponent has behind. He goes deep into the tank before eventually deciding on a call. Well, a disaster, a genuine disaster, has turned into an almost $7,000 or $8,000 pot. Oh my goodness. Christmas has come early this year. So by this point, the stand-up game is going. The game has been kicked up to 1020, and the $80 straddle is on. A lot to take in, but let's jump right in. We're 6-handed at this point. I look down at ace deuce offsuit from the cutoff. I decide to raise to 250, and there's only 3 people left in this thing. I'm one of the last 3, and the straddler is one of the last 3, and he makes the call. We're going heads up to a flop that comes 10 jack queen rainbow. With the action checked over to me, I decided to bet small for 175. Our opponent makes the call, and the turn card comes a queen of diamonds. I hate bluffing on paired boards, specifically when the board pair is the top card, but with the action checked over to me, honestly, I just want to sit down. So I just get scared and just throw out $450 as a bluff here as a saving grace. And luckily for us, not too much thinking, our opponent ends up making the fold. $80 straddle on, and we don't have to pay that $400 bounty for losing the stand-up game.
Okay, so as you guys could see there, game is going off the rails, and it's also the holiday time of the year, so I decided, hey, let's have some fun. I had the restaurant, ordered some food for delivery, and it came down, and everybody here is having some tasty food, so it's been a blast. Outside of the 7 deuce shenanigans, which that was pretty cool. Otherwise, you know, not a whole lot to go over. Slowly chipping back up. We tried to punt it all up. Well, we did technically, but we're still in the game. We're still hanging in there. Either way, we've been playing 10-handed because the game is just insane. So if you guys are ever interested, let me know. Instagram DMs are open. Applications are going. Either way, I gotta play some poker because I gotta get my money back. See you guys in a bit.
Early position decides to make it $80 to go. I find myself in the small blind with 10-9 suited. Love this hand. I mean, to be fair, if you could marry it, I probably would find a way to. Either way, I end up making the call here, and then the big blind decides to kick it up to $270. Not too big of a 3-bet here, so when a player from the initial raising spot ends up calling, I'm happy to call as well. We're going off to a flop that's pretty decent as it comes jack 8 deuce rainbow. With the action checking over to the initial raiser, he decides to take over the betting and bets $275. We both make the call here, and then I hit it. 7 of diamonds on the turn, Bink City, brings in a backdoor flush draw, and then after all of that, I don't bet. What the heck? I don't throw out a bet here. I hate it. Ends up checking through, and the river card comes at 3 of diamonds. It brings in that backdoor flush, and once again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm checking. I don't know if I'm just in the mood of giving back all the equity in the world. Maybe I don't want to take money today. I don't know what the hell's going on with me, but ends up checking through again. And if you guys learned anything in today's episode, you learned one thing for sure. How to win the absolute minimum when you turn these stone cold nuts. 101. Won't even charge you for this lesson. Moving along here, under the gun makes it $60 to go. Next to act makes the call, and the action is on me. In a beautiful spot with pocket queens, we look down at a monster here. I decided 3-bet to $250. The big blind, friend of the vlog, obviously someone we've talked about quite a bit in today's episode, Armenian Matt makes the cold call. Under the gun, initial raiser decides to jam it all in here for $800. With the action back to me, I decide to 5-bet here to $1,500. I don't want Matt to get in the hand with whatever he happens to be holding. That doesn't work. He ends up making the call here. We're going 3 ways off with one person already all in to a flop that's pretty good. 10-5 deuce rainbow. With the action checked over to me, only one hand improves that I was worried about, which is 10, so I decided to bet here as a down bet for $1,000. Our opponent doesn't care. Doesn't give a crap about what I bet. He makes the call. We're going off to a turn card. I'm praying, please no jack. Please no jack. Please. Oh, God, that's a jack. One of the hands I was genuinely afraid of, for sure. With him checking over to me this time, I decided to proceed with some caution, and I decided to check it back as well. And we're going off to a river card that comes a 6 of diamonds. So once again, doesn't change a whole lot here. And at this point, our opponent decides to lead out for a bet of $3,000. So, you know, all jokes aside, this has been running its course. It only makes sense that a massive pot where I get put in a really big spot comes to me once again. And unfortunately, it's against Matt. Let's not get too far down the rabbit hole. I end up throwing in the call for $3,000, and our opponent shows pocket kings. So a very, very sneakily played pocket kings from Matt. Got to tip your cap off to him. Really, really odd play has turned into a massive $8,000 or $9,000 pot for him. If it's going to go to anyone, happy it's going to go to somebody that's providing some fun for the game. So good hand to you, Matt. Even with all of what happened in the last hand, we still could have been piled in and lost significantly more. Matt brings a ton of action, so getting more money in the middle was inevitable, and somehow we faded that. In this next hand, we are now 5-handed, deep into the night. Yes, it's 6 o'clock in the morning right now. This game has been running since 7 p.m. the day before. And in this next hand, we're again playing 10-20. I race to $60 from the cutoff with Jack 9 offsuit. The button makes a call, And the flop comes out 9-7 deuce rainbow, flopping top pair on a dry board. Seems pretty decent. I decided to bet pretty big here though. I make it $100. I'm sleepy. Maybe I'm too lazy to get smaller chips, but our opponent ends up raising to $350. Well, I didn't flop top pair to fold to a raise, so I end up making the call here, proceeding with caution when the turn card comes as 7 of clubs. Alright, so now there's only one combination of pocket 7s left, because that would be quad, so a little less worried about that hand. The only hands I should be worried about for value are going to be maybe pocket 9s and pocket deuces, but again, we block the 9s here and deuces. Yeah, maybe our opponent's not calling that all the time from the button, hard to tell. Either way, the action checks over to him, and he decides to bet 500. Again, my hand can improve to the nuts here with a 9 on the river, so I end up making the call as it's hard for me to be drawing completely dead. Either way, the river card comes as 6 of spades. It does bring in that front door flush here, which is, again, something to kind of worry about, but maybe not too much. I check to my opponent, and he ends up jamming it all in for about $3,000. I go deep into the tank here, and you can hear me actually muttering to myself under my breath that this is a really sick spot, and that I think my opponent has pocket deuces. It's pocket deuces or nothing, and even with all that, it's just a massive overbet. And sure, my opponent's a solid player, but I just don't think players are balanced enough in this spot here that even with the flush coming in, it's just hard to see a world where my opponent ever has a bluff. So for me, maybe not for you guys, but for me, this is a really tough fold, but I end up making the pretty disciplined laydown. Our opponent, I did ask nicely, was kind enough to show me what he had. Drum roll, please. Pocket deuces. So we end up calling his hand out exactly. I was proud of myself for that. And we end up finding a way to get away from it. Pretty sick last couple hands to really derail our session, but can't win them all.
Is a really sad update. We were up a little bit, I think. We were into the game for like 60 something, and I think at our high point we were maybe at like 8 or maybe like, I don't know. We were up at some point in the session. Ended up booking biggest loss so far in this thing. Unfortunate to we just ran really brutally bad. I'll go over one hand. We don't have to put any boards up, as I'll just go over it very quickly. But double board bomb pot. I had top set and second nut flush draw on one of the boards, and I blocked the nut straight and I had kings on the other board that was like 5 high or whatever, 6 high or whatever. I bet, get called in 2 spots. There's another player all in. River brings me my flush. I had king 7 of spades or something. Obviously, there is still the ace high of flush out there. I bet for value like 500 and get tank jammed on, which always is the nuts. So super tilted. I actually lost my cool, so sorry, but on a day like today where just nothing went my way after the halfway point, I mean, I can only be human for so long. So ended up having to lose that pot and left us with pennies. So book a 4K loss today, $4,030. Not fun, but hey, it could be worse. You know, some people obviously lost more in this game, so you got to just take it as it comes and just live with it. So either way, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy day and a very, very happy New Year, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Also, yeah, Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah, whatever you guys celebrate. Kwanzaa. Enjoy yourselves. Bye.